But first, we drove to Virgil, better known to locals as Virgil. After you've crossed the Missouri River on the Virgil Ferry, you can spend the night at one of the most unique B&Bs in the country and sleep in a restored homesteader cabin.
Well, some people say, well, they get here, who comes here? How do you sell anything? And our location is probably our best asset.
Don Sorensen grew up 6 miles away on the farm his brother still operates today. The grandson of Montana homesteaders, Don became a pharmacist instead of a farmer and had a lifelong interest in collecting and restoring antiques.
I started restoring things on the family farm when I got out of pharmacy school, and my dad thought I was crazy, and I knew I didn't want to do farming and ranching. I didn't want to sit on a tractor and not talk to anybody, so.
As a kid in the country, Virgil was a favorite spot for camping and picnicking. Don saw the post office here close in 1961. The general store went out of business in 1970, and the railroad shut down in the 1980s, leaving Virgil a ghost town.
I'd filled up the attic of the barn at home, and I looked at this building once, and it was abandoned. I go,
Don bought the abandoned store and spent 3 years restoring the downstairs into a shop for his antiques.
First thing I did is open up this window here and park the truck down there, 1.5-ton truck, and shoveled out 2 truckloads of plaster that had fallen to the floor.
Upstairs, it took 10 years of work to transform the rooms where railroad workers once slept into what today is a beautiful bed and breakfast.
But each room we've named it for somebody who's actually lived in Virgil.
Or you can spend the night outside in one of Don's 6 authentic, meticulously restored homestead cabins, all recovered and brought in from within a 40-mile radius of Virgil.
I started restoring things on the family farm. There was a bunkhouse that was actually a homestead cabin, and I drug all the stuff from the farm and fixed it up. And I have moved it down here, and then one thing led to another. Somebody came and says, there's some antiques in this cabin, we're gonna burn it down, do you want it?
There's also a bed in the sheep herder's wagon.
This is the old ice house where they used to harvest ice off the river.
You wash up in the old ice house, converted into a state-of-the-art shower and bath. The cabins are all named after the homesteaders who built them.
They were going to burn them down.
The Mosiers were an Indiana family of 3 brothers who came west and built 3 cabins.
We salvaged 2 of them.
During restoration, Don found the love letters of a young girl. He tracked down the author, whose daughter brought the 80-year-old to come and see the cabin where she'd grown up.
She went to her daughter and she says, you see this scar on my arm? Now she's 80 years old. I went to throw the wash water out that window and there was a nail there and she still had a scar.
Entire families of 5 or 6 people once called these tiny structures home.
It was tough. My grandma told me some horror stories, only because I started questioning her and asking her. But there's a lot of stuff they don't like to talk about because they weren't the good old days. They were tough. They were very tough.
In the 1910s, Virgil was a thriving homesteader community, named after its founder, Virgil Blankenbaker. After building the general store in 1912, he added a bank in 1917. But the bank closed just 10 years later, and Virgil dwindled away. Today, the restored bank, the store, and the homesteader cabins have made Virgil a destination for both those looking for a unique overnight experience and antique hunters from all over the country.
Everybody comes to my front door, which is kind of nice, so I don't have to go see the world.
Don even owns the old grain elevator.
I want to make a restaurant out of it and call it Good Grub at the Greeley, but I'll probably never get that done.
But to get here, you have to use the ferry, and that in itself is a special treat. If nothing else, the short trip across the Missouri to Virgil and Montana's 2 other ferries force you to slow down, get out of the car, and experience what we so often miss in our busy lives.
Probably one of the most beautiful places in the world here. The more I look upstream, the more I remember how pretty it is.